Biker pushed a royal guard to the ground, but when he stood back up, karma struck. People were streaming toward the palace square, excited to witness the ceremony that had been announced weeks earlier. Flags fluttered in the wind, colorful banners hung from poles, and the sound of marching drums echoed faintly from within the palace grounds. Tourists, locals, and even journalists had gathered, creating a lively, buzzing crowd that filled the streets with chatter and laughter. Among the crowd, a young man named Daniel was revving the engine of his motorcycle. The roar of the bike turned heads immediately. He was in his mid-20s, tall, with a lean build that suggested he spent time at the gym, and he carried an air of confidence that often tipped into recklessness. Today, he had decided to ride through the area near the palace gates, just to see how close he could get to the excitement. His friends were riding behind him, laughing and cheering as Daniel maneuvered the bike through the crowd, weaving carefully between pedestrians yet intentionally showing off. Daniel loved the thrill of attention. For him, it was not just about riding, it was about being seen. And today, with the crowd gathered for the royal ceremony, he felt the perfect opportunity had arrived. "Watch this," he said to his friend behind him, spinning the throttle as the bike growled in protest. The crowd's murmurs rose as people turned to see the daring biker making his way through. However, not everyone was pleased with Daniel's antics. Dressed in crisp, immaculate uniforms, the royal guards patrolled the area with precision. One of them, a tall man named Sergeant Armand, noticed Daniel weaving dangerously through the crowd. Armand had been on duty for many years, and he was known for his discipline and composure. He immediately approached Daniel with the authority his position demanded, moving swiftly but calmly through the throng of people. "Sir, you cannot ride your motorcycle through this area," Armand called, his voice firm but controlled. "Please stop and move away from the restricted zone." Daniel, caught in the moment and feeling the rush of adrenaline, barely looked at the guard. Instead, he smirked, revved the engine louder, and said, "Relax, man, I know what I'm doing." Armand's brow furrowed. He had dealt with reckless individuals before, but the proximity to the royal palace meant that any disturbance could have serious consequences. "I am ordering you to stop," he said, raising a hand in a formal gesture of authority. For a brief second, Daniel hesitated, just enough for Armand to take a step closer. But the hesitation was fleeting. Daniel's confidence, bordering on arrogance, took over. With a swift motion, he nudged the guard with his shoulder as he tried to pass, causing Armand to stumble slightly. In a split second, the guard lost balance and fell to the ground, his uniform wrinkling, his hat tumbling beside him. Gasps erupted from the crowd. People stepped back instinctively, shocked at what they had just witnessed. Cameras and phones immediately turned toward the scene, capturing the moment in slow-motion-like clarity. Some spectators muttered in disbelief, while others whispered about the audacity of the young biker. Daniel, realizing he had made a significant impact, couldn't resist a grin. He accelerated, weaving past the crowd once more, leaving behind a trail of astonished onlookers. He felt invincible in that moment, almost as if he had won some unspoken challenge. The roar of his bike faded as he sped away, leaving a stunned Sergeant Armand on the ground, quickly regaining his footing and dusting off the uniform. Armand took a deep breath, calming himself. He was trained to handle situations like this, and despite the humiliation, he knew his first priority was the safety of the public and the dignity of the royal event. Straightening his uniform, he gave the crowd a reassuring nod, signaling that everything was under control. Some of the spectators, still murmuring, returned their attention to the ceremony, but the whispers about the daring biker lingered in the air. Meanwhile, Daniel and his friends had moved several blocks away, stopping at a quiet corner to catch their breath. Laughter erupted from the group, mixed with the nervous energy of having just pushed the limits. "Did you see his face?" one friend chuckled. "I thought he was going to eat the pavement." Daniel leaned back on his bike, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and pride. "Yeah, that was close," he admitted. "But it's all part of the fun. He's just a guard. He'll be fine." At that moment, Daniel's phone buzzed. A video had already begun circulating on social media, capturing him pushing the guard to the ground. Within minutes, dozens of people had posted their own clips and commentary. Comments ranged from amusement to anger, with some criticizing the young man for his reckless behavior. Daniel scrolled through the messages, some mocking him, some warning of consequences, and others praising his boldness. For the first time, he felt a slight tug of concern, though it was easily overshadowed by the thrill of attention. Back at the palace, Armand had reported the incident to his superiors. The higher officials, while appreciating his restraint, emphasized the need for a formal report. They instructed the security team to identify the individual and monitor any potential future incidents. It was clear to everyone that while Daniel had escaped immediate trouble, his actions would not go unnoticed. Meanwhile, in the crowd, ordinary citizens discussed the incident animatedly. Some admired Daniel's daring, though quietly, while others shook their heads at the lack of respect shown toward the royal guard. Children, fascinated by the speed and noise of the motorcycle, pointed excitedly, oblivious to the seriousness of the event. The adults, however, understood that the moment was a reminder of the delicate balance between thrill-seeking and public safety. As the sun continued to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Daniel rode off toward the outskirts of the city, still unaware of the storm that his impulsive action had triggered. The memory of the guard sprawled on the ground lingered only briefly in his mind before being replaced by the rush of wind and speed. For him, this was adventure, a story to tell his friends, a moment to remember. Yet in the weeks that followed, the video would resurface repeatedly, shared by social media users, local news outlets, and even some concerned citizens. Each time it circulated, Daniel's reckless moment was replayed, analyzed, and discussed, slowly building a sense of accountability that he could not escape. The young biker's moment of triumph was fleeting. What seemed like an act of boldness at the time had planted the seeds for consequences that he could not yet foresee. Sergeant Armand, on the other hand, remained calm and professional, embodying the discipline and patience that defined his years of service. He was determined to let the law and protocol handle the situation, believing that true authority required patience, not impulsive retaliation. For Daniel, the thrill of the moment had masked the potential repercussions. He had pushed a royal guard to the ground, a moment that would become both infamous and unforgettable. As he rode through quieter streets, feeling the wind on his face and the engine beneath him, he had no idea that karma, in its own quiet way, had already begun to take notice. The evening ended with a mix of exhilaration and tension. The crowd at the palace continued to cheer and watch the ceremony, while the young biker and his friends eventually returned home, laughing about the daring stunt. But behind the laughter, a sense of uncertainty lingered, a subtle awareness that the world has a way of balancing moments of reckless bravery with lessons that are often hard to ignore. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a sense of lingering excitement. The thrill of yesterday's stunt still pulsed in his veins. He could still feel the vibration of the motorcycle engine, the roar of the crowd, and the astonished expressions of the spectators. But as he stretched and reached for his phone, the excitement began to mingle with a faint edge of anxiety. Notifications had poured in overnight, messages, video shares, and comments that showed his stunt was no longer a private adventure among friends. Scrolling through his social media, Daniel's smile faltered. Videos of him pushing the royal guard to the ground had been shared thousands of times. Each clip highlighted the moment in slow motion, with captions ranging from admiration to outrage. Some people called him daring, others reckless, and many warned that he could face serious consequences. Local news channels had even picked up the story, showing footage with professional commentary. Reporters debated the safety and legality of riding through such a crowded area, emphasizing that the royal guard had acted professionally and that Daniel's actions were reckless. Daniel's friends tried to calm him. "Don't worry about it," one said, laughing nervously. "It's just attention. People forget fast." But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something serious was coming. For the first time, the thrill of the stunt was replaced by an unsettling tension. What if the authorities tracked him down? What if legal action was taken? What if the guard pressed charges? His mind raced through countless scenarios, each more concerning than the last. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand was fully aware of the situation. In the days following the incident, he had returned to his regular duties at the palace, but he kept an eye on local news and social media. He had seen the videos repeatedly, and although the image of himself on the ground was somewhat humiliating, he maintained his professionalism. Armand had faced challenges before, and he knew that reacting impulsively would only make matters worse. Instead, he focused on documenting the incident and reporting it through the proper channels. Palace officials had convened to discuss the matter. Security footage, eyewitness statements, and the viral social media posts were all reviewed carefully. They agreed that Daniel's actions were reckless, and they made a plan to ensure that he would be identified. Their goal was not just to punish, but to prevent any similar incidents from happening in the future. Armand, known for his calm demeanor and attention to detail, was trusted with coordinating the investigation. Daniel, unaware of the full extent of the scrutiny, decided to lay low for a while. He stopped posting on social media and avoided riding his motorcycle near crowded areas. He went to work and spent time with friends, but the adrenaline from yesterday's stunt lingered. At first, he convinced himself that it was all over, that no real consequences would follow, and that he had simply enjoyed a daring adventure. But the reality began to sink in. One afternoon, as Daniel sat in his apartment scrolling through social media, he noticed a comment that made his stomach drop. "He pushed a royal guard, they'll catch him soon enough." Another read, "Karma never misses." "Wait and see." A third comment linked to a news article detailing the security measures around the palace and explaining how authorities were tracing anyone who violated the restricted zones. Daniel felt a cold sweat on his forehead. His heart raced. It was no longer just about reputation or pride. It was about facing the possibility of legal trouble. The realization hit him hard. His actions had consequences, and those consequences were now unavoidable. Over the next few days, Daniel began noticing people looking at him differently. In the streets, he sometimes caught the wary gaze of strangers. Friends he had previously seen daily now seemed more cautious around him. Even some neighbors whispered when they thought he wasn't listening. The viral video had made him infamous, at least locally, and there was no easy way to escape the attention. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand continued his professional approach. He spoke with colleagues, gathered witness statements, and coordinated with local police. The guard's focus was on ensuring public safety and enforcing the rules. He remained composed, never losing his cool in public or online. His colleagues admired his discipline, noting that despite being publicly humiliated, he had handled the situation with dignity. Daniel, feeling increasingly cornered by the attention and potential consequences, began to reflect on his actions. The thrill of yesterday's stunt now seemed reckless and foolish. He realized that he had endangered not just himself, but also the crowd and the integrity of the public event. The adrenaline rush that had made him feel invincible was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret. To distract himself, Daniel focused on work and tried to avoid motorcycles altogether, but it was impossible to escape reminders of his stunt. People recognized him, and friends and acquaintances occasionally brought up the incident in conversation, often laughing or shaking their heads. The reality of his impulsiveness had become unavoidable. One evening, Daniel decided to visit the site of the incident, not out of defiance, but to understand the gravity of what had happened. Walking slowly through the plaza near the royal palace, he observed the crowd control measures, the barriers, and the meticulous coordination of the guards. He noticed Sergeant Armand standing near the main entrance, speaking calmly with tourists and colleagues. For the first time, Daniel truly saw the professionalism and patience of the guard. Armand's presence commanded respect without demanding it, simply through composure and attention to duty. Daniel felt a pang of guilt. He remembered the moment he had shoved the guard and how the man had fallen to the ground, steadying himself without losing dignity. It was a stark contrast to Daniel's impulsive behavior. He realized that the incident was not just about him. It was about the balance of order and respect, about rules that existed to protect everyone. Over the next week, Daniel's anxiety grew as he watched the video continue to circulate online. The comments ranged from amusement to warnings, but one recurring theme struck him. People kept emphasizing the idea of accountability and the inevitability of consequences. Each time he saw a new post, he felt a tightening in his chest, a reminder that his actions could not be undone. To complicate matters, Daniel began receiving messages from strangers, some curious, some critical, and some threatening. A few warned him to be careful, suggesting that the authorities were now tracking his movements. Others mocked him, calling him reckless and immature. The overwhelming attention made him feel both exposed and vulnerable. During this time, Daniel's friends noticed a change in him. The once carefree, thrill-seeking biker now seemed more cautious and reflective. He avoided risky behavior, stayed off social media, and even refrained from riding his motorcycle for several days. One friend asked, "Are you scared or something?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm not scared, I'm just thinking. Maybe I went too far." His friends laughed nervously, unsure whether to take him seriously. But Daniel had begun to understand that the excitement of recklessness had come at a cost. He had tested boundaries, challenged authority, and now he was beginning to feel the weight of responsibility for his actions. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand continued his careful observation. He had not forgotten the incident, but he maintained his professionalism. He monitored the situation without seeking revenge, confident that the proper processes would ensure accountability. Armand's calm approach contrasted sharply with Daniel's growing anxiety, highlighting the difference between impulsive behavior and disciplined action. One afternoon, Daniel decided to visit a local cafe to clear his mind. As he sat by the window, watching the hustle and bustle of the city, he reflected on the lessons he had learned. He thought about the people in the crowd, the potential danger he had caused, and the viral video that had spread his actions far beyond the immediate area. He realized that a single moment of impulsiveness could have long-lasting consequences, and that true thrill or excitement was not worth the risk of harm or public shame. By the end of the week, Daniel had made a personal decision. He would take responsibility for his actions, not because he was forced to, but because he understood the importance of accountability. He would avoid reckless stunts, be more mindful of public safety, and focus on regaining the respect of those around him. It was not just about avoiding punishment. It was about personal growth and learning to channel energy and confidence in positive, responsible ways. The viral video continued to circulate, and discussions about the incident persisted online. Daniel's story became a cautionary tale among social media users, a reminder that impulsive actions, especially in public spaces with strict rules, can have consequences that are difficult to avoid. People debated the incident, some focusing on the biker's recklessness, others on the guard's composure, but the overall message was clear. Actions have consequences, and respect for rules and authority is essential in maintaining public safety. Through it all, Daniel slowly came to terms with what had happened. The initial excitement of yesterday's stunt was replaced with reflection and responsibility. He understood that courage without thought could be dangerous, and that true bravery involved making smart, careful choices even when adrenaline and peer pressure pushed in the opposite direction. By the time the week came to a close, Daniel had a renewed sense of self-awareness. He avoided motorcycles in crowded areas, focused on positive hobbies, and began to think about ways to channel his energy and adventurous spirit safely. The incident near the royal palace had left a permanent mark on his life, not as a source of pride, but as a lesson in humility, responsibility, and the value of patience. Although he could not change what had happened, Daniel knew that he could change how he responded moving forward. The viral video, the comments, and the ongoing discussions served as reminders that one moment of recklessness could ripple outward, affecting not only oneself but also others. He resolved to use the experience as a turning point, to make better choices, and to approach life with a balance of courage and caution. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand continued his duties at the palace, confident that the situation was under control. He observed from a distance, knowing that justice would follow its course naturally, and that lessons would be learned without the need for impulsive retaliation. His professionalism and calm demeanor remained a quiet but powerful influence, even for Daniel, who had begun to recognize the value of patience, discipline, and thoughtful action. A week had passed since Daniel had pushed the royal guard to the ground. Though the memory of the incident still lingered in his mind, he had started trying to focus on his daily life, work, friends, and ordinary routines. Yet even as he attempted to carry on, he could not shake the sense that consequences were quietly approaching, like a shadow he couldn't outrun. It started subtly. On his way to work one morning, Daniel noticed a few police vehicles parked near a traffic checkpoint a few streets away from his apartment. He assumed it was routine, nothing unusual. But as he passed, he felt several pairs of eyes on him, and a chill ran down his spine. Could it be coincidence, or had the authorities begun looking for him after the viral video? The thought made his chest tighten. Daniel tried to ignore the anxiety, telling himself that he had behaved responsibly since the incident. He had avoided riding his motorcycle near crowded areas, he had not posted anything online about the stunt, and he had generally kept a low profile. He believed that if he remained cautious, the situation would pass. Yet, a nagging sense of unease remained. Later that week, Daniel decided to venture out, feeling confident enough to test his luck. He took his motorcycle out of the garage and rode through quieter streets, away from crowds and public events. The engine's roar, familiar and comforting, brought back memories of freedom and exhilaration. He had loved riding, and after several days of abstinence, he felt the temptation to experience that rush again. As he approached a lightly trafficked intersection, Daniel noticed a familiar sight, a police checkpoint. Officers were stopping vehicles for routine checks, verifying licenses, registration, and ensuring road safety. Daniel slowed down, trying to appear casual. But before he could proceed, one officer signaled him to pull over. His heart skipped a beat. For a moment, panic overtook him. He thought of yesterday's stunt, of the viral video, of the possibility that the police were finally connecting the dots. Slowly, he brought his bike to a halt at the side of the road, trying to appear calm. "Good morning, sir," said the officer, a young man with a serious expression. "We're conducting routine checks today. License and registration, please." Daniel fumbled slightly as he reached for his documents, his hands trembling just enough for the officer to notice. Sure," he said, handing over the papers. The officer examined them carefully. "Everything seems in order," he said, handing the documents back. "Just a friendly reminder, please follow traffic rules and be careful on the roads." Daniel exhaled, relief flooding his body. He smiled nervously. "Of course, officer, thank you." He started the bike and rode away slowly, trying to convince himself that this was just coincidence, that the universe had not yet decided to balance the scales. But Daniel's sense of relief was short-lived. A few blocks later, as he took a sharp turn, he misjudged the angle slightly. His front tire hit a small patch of loose gravel, and the bike wobbled violently. Before he could regain control, Daniel felt himself tipping forward. Instinctively, he tried to stabilize the bike, but gravity was relentless. The motorcycle skidded across the pavement, and Daniel was thrown forward, landing on his side with a loud thud. Pain shot through his arm and shoulder as he tried to stand, but the scrape across his jeans and minor bruises reminded him that luck had only partially protected him. Bystanders rushed over immediately. Some offered water, others helped him sit up. Daniel's friends had not followed him, so he was alone in the crowd. His heart pounded, not just from the physical pain, but from the sudden realization that this was exactly the kind of consequence he had been ignoring. Karma, it seemed, had arrived. A passerby, noticing the minor accident, recorded a short video of the incident and uploaded it to social media. Within hours, it began to circulate, with captions emphasizing irony. "The reckless biker meets his match and karma in action." Comments poured in, many reminding Daniel of the viral video from the Royal Palace incident. The story of yesterday's recklessness was now intertwined with today's accident, creating a narrative of cause and effect that Daniel could not escape. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand, still on duty at the palace, noticed the clip trending online. Though he had no personal stake in Daniel's misfortune, he felt a quiet sense of validation. The incident had served as a reminder that reckless behavior often comes with unintended consequences. Armand remained professional, of course, but the subtle irony was not lost on him. The young man who had pushed him now faced the unexpected results of impulsive decisions. Daniel sat on the curb, watching people pass by, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. The scrape on his arm stung, and his pride had taken a blow. He tried to assess the damage to his motorcycle, which had minor scratches but remained functional. As he stood up, helped by a kind stranger, he realized that luck had spared him from serious injury, but he could no longer ignore the message. The incident sparked reflection in Daniel. He remembered the thrill he had felt when shoving the guard, the roar of the engine, and the adrenaline that had made him feel invincible. Now, however, those feelings seemed foolish and fleeting. He understood that he had risked more than he had realized, not just personal injury, but potential harm to others and legal consequences that could follow from reckless actions. Over the next few days, Daniel's reputation began to shift. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired his boldness now looked at him with caution, and some offered unsolicited advice. "Maybe it's time to be a little more careful," one said gently. "You've already had a close call." Daniel took the advice to heart. He stopped riding his motorcycle altogether for a while, focusing on quieter activities, walking, reading, and spending time with family. Each day, he reflected on the sequence of events that had brought him from a daring stunt near the royal palace to the minor accident on a quiet street. He realized that every choice had consequences, and that ignoring rules or underestimating potential risks could lead to situations far beyond his control. At work, Daniel's focus sharpened. He channeled his energy into projects that required attention to detail and patience, something he had often struggled with in the past. Colleagues noticed the change and commented positively, though Daniel himself knew that the transformation had been forced by experience rather than intention. Still, he felt a sense of growth and maturity that he had never experienced before. Even his family noticed the change. His parents, who had often worried about his impulsive behavior, expressed relief at his newfound caution. They reminded him gently but firmly that freedom and thrill should never come at the expense of safety or responsibility. Daniel listened, internalizing their words in a way he had not done before. Yet, the viral videos and online commentary continued to follow him. Each new post served as a reminder of past mistakes and the lessons they carried. Daniel had no control over the narrative, but he could control his actions moving forward. This realization marked a turning point. He understood that personal responsibility and humility were far more valuable than temporary admiration or notoriety. Through it all, Daniel also began to appreciate the role of others in shaping his journey. The Royal Guard, Sergeant Armand, had handled the initial incident with dignity and patience, setting an example of professionalism that contrasted sharply with Daniel's impulsiveness. The bystanders who helped him after his motorcycle accident had shown kindness and community support. These experiences collectively taught him that respect for others, adherence to rules, and consideration for safety were essential in every aspect of life. By the end of the week, Daniel had regained a measure of confidence, though it was tempered by caution and reflection. He resumed daily routines but with a new mindset, approaching each decision with thoughtfulness rather than impulsiveness. The adrenaline-fueled recklessness of the past seemed distant, replaced by an understanding that true excitement could coexist with responsibility. Daniel also decided to share his story with close friends and colleagues, not to boast, but to illustrate the lessons he had learned. He recounted the sequence of events, from the reckless stunt at the palace to the minor crash on a quiet street, emphasizing the importance of foresight, self-control, and respect for rules. His story became a point of conversation, inspiring others to reflect on their own actions and the potential consequences of impulsiveness. Through these reflections, Daniel's perspective transformed. The thrill of reckless freedom had been replaced with a deeper understanding of accountability. He realized that every action had a ripple effect, reaching far beyond immediate gratification. Each choice, big or small, carried weight, and ignoring that weight could lead to pain, embarrassment, or worse. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand continued his duties at the palace, maintaining his calm and composed demeanor. He occasionally saw mentions of Daniel's second incident online, but he did not gloat or celebrate. Instead, he noted quietly that the sequence of events was a natural reminder of how discipline and patience often outlast impulsive bravado. The Guard's professionalism remained a subtle but influential force, demonstrating the value of measured action and integrity. By the close of Part 3, Daniel had undergone a profound internal shift. He had faced the consequences of impulsive actions, learned to appreciate caution and responsibility, and begun to understand the importance of humility. The events of the past 2 weeks had taught him a lesson that no thrill or rush could replicate. Life demanded respect for rules, for others, and for the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility. Though the viral videos and social media chatter continued, Daniel no longer feared them. Instead, he used the experiences as reminders to make better choices and to act with thoughtfulness. The reckless biker who had shoved a royal guard and narrowly avoided a serious accident had begun a journey toward maturity and awareness, a journey that would continue to shape his decisions, actions, and interactions with others. And somewhere, quietly observing the unfolding events, Sergeant Armand continued his work with the same calm precision, knowing that sometimes the most powerful lessons are learned not through authority alone, but through experience, consequence, and reflection. The weeks following Daniel's minor accident passed with a slow, steady rhythm. He had returned to his daily life, but he was no longer the same carefree biker who had pushed a royal guard to the ground. Instead, he had begun a period of reflection that would shape his actions and choices for years to come. Each morning, he awoke with a sense of responsibility, thinking carefully before making decisions, whether small or significant. Daniel had noticed that the viral videos from both incidents continued to circulate online. While some posts mocked his previous recklessness, others shared his story as a cautionary tale about the importance of self-control, responsibility, and respect for authority. Initially, seeing himself online in this way stung his pride. He remembered the thrill he had felt during his first reckless stunt, and how quickly admiration could turn into criticism and public scrutiny. But over time, he began to see the value in these lessons, realizing that the world often teaches accountability in ways that cannot be ignored. One afternoon, Daniel decided to visit the community center near his neighborhood, where he had occasionally volunteered in the past. He walked through the familiar doors, greeted the staff warmly, and offered his assistance with the ongoing community projects. His previous reputation as a thrill-seeker had preceded him, but now his demeanor was calmer, more thoughtful, and earnest. The staff noticed the change immediately. "Daniel, good to see you," said Ms. Ahmed, the community center coordinator. "It's been a while. What brings you here today?" Daniel smiled, trying to appear casual. "I just want to help, really. I've been thinking a lot about my actions recently, and I want to do something positive with my time." Ms. Ahmed raised an eyebrow, sensing sincerity in his words. "That's good to hear. We always need volunteers. Let's start with helping to organize the youth workshop." Daniel spent the next few hours arranging materials, preparing the room, and assisting children as they worked on small projects. He felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced from the rush of riding his motorcycle recklessly or gaining attention online. The smiles and appreciation of the children and staff were real and immediate, unlike the fleeting thrill of notoriety. He realized that contributing to the community, helping others, and making thoughtful choices brought a satisfaction that reckless stunts never could. Meanwhile, the viral videos continued to attract attention, and a few local journalists reached out to Daniel for interviews. He agreed cautiously, wanting to share the lessons he had learned rather than boast about past misbehavior. In the interview, he recounted the sequence of events that had led to his public humiliation, the lessons from his minor accident, and the importance of self-reflection. "I realize now," Daniel said in one interview, "that every action has consequences. I was reckless and I hurt more than just myself. I want others to understand that thrill or attention is never worth endangering yourself or others. Responsibility matters." The interview received positive responses online. Many people appreciated his honesty and willingness to take accountability for his mistakes. Slowly, Daniel's reputation shifted again, this time toward admiration for his growth and maturity rather than for reckless daring. He began to understand that true respect is earned through actions, patience, and integrity, not through momentary displays of bravado. At the palace, Sergeant Armand continued his duties with quiet diligence. He had seen the interviews and followed Daniel's gradual transformation from reckless biker to thoughtful young man. Armand noted that the lessons had clearly been learned, and while he maintained professional boundaries, he appreciated the subtle shift in Daniel's behavior. He understood that discipline and patience could guide individuals to growth, even when initial encounters were difficult or confrontational. As part of his journey, Daniel also reached out to the Royal Guard directly. He wrote a carefully considered message, expressing sincere remorse for his actions and acknowledging the impact of his impulsive behavior. "Sir," the message read, "I want to apologize for pushing you that day near the palace. It was reckless, and I understand now how wrong it was. I hope you can accept my apology, and I promise to act responsibly moving forward." To Daniel's relief, Sergeant Armand responded politely and professionally. He accepted the apology, noting that the young man had shown growth and that accepting accountability was an important step toward maturity. The simple exchange left Daniel with a sense of closure he had not anticipated. It was a quiet, meaningful acknowledgement that his actions had consequences, but that redemption was possible through humility and change. Over the following months, Daniel continued his focus on personal growth. He joined a local riding club, not for thrill or fame, but to practice safe riding and learn more about road safety. The instructors emphasized caution, planning, and respect for traffic laws, and Daniel immersed himself in the lessons. He discovered that riding could be enjoyable without risking public safety or personal harm. For the first time, he felt a sense of balance between his love of motorcycles and the discipline required to ride safely. Daniel also began to mentor younger riders. He shared his experiences, both the excitement and the mistakes, in workshops and informal sessions. He explained the importance of caution, responsibility, and respect for others on the road. His stories captivated the young audience, not for the thrill of the stunts, but for the honesty and insight behind the lessons. Through these experiences, Daniel realized that growth often comes from mistakes. The very incidents that had embarrassed him and challenged his pride had become tools for teaching, reflection, and community engagement. He understood that while adrenaline and risk could provide temporary excitement, lasting fulfillment came from meaningful action, helping others, and making thoughtful decisions. One evening, Daniel visited the plaza near the Royal Palace again, not as a thrill-seeker, but as a reflective observer. The place where he had first acted recklessly now felt different. He noticed the guards moving with precision, the organized flow of visitors, and the overall sense of safety and order. Walking slowly, he reflected on the journey from that impulsive moment to the growth he had experienced. He recognized that the events had taught him the value of patience, discipline, and humility. As he stood there, Daniel remembered the viral videos, the comments online, and the lessons from his minor accident. Instead of anger or embarrassment, he felt gratitude for the experiences, the people who guided him, and the chance to learn and improve. He understood that life often teaches lessons in unexpected ways, and that humility, accountability, and reflection were more important than fleeting thrill or public recognition. Daniel's journey also had a subtle impact on others. Friends and family noticed his transformation, and even strangers who followed his story online commented on his growth. Young riders he mentored listened intently, inspired by the honesty and lessons he shared. He became a quiet example of how recklessness could be turned into learning, how mistakes could be transformed into growth, and how accountability could lead to respect and redemption. Meanwhile, Sergeant Armand continued his duties at the palace, confident that the situation had been resolved. He had no need for confrontation or vengeance. Observing Daniel's growth, he noted that patience, professionalism, and calm discipline often produced results that impulsive action could not. The guard's steady example had not only maintained order during the initial incident, but also silently guided Daniel toward reflection and change. By the end of the year, Daniel had fully embraced his new approach to life. He still rode motorcycles, but with careful attention to safety and respect for others. He volunteered regularly, mentored young riders, and shared his story to help others avoid the mistakes he had made. His reputation, once associated with recklessness and impulsivity, had shifted to one of thoughtfulness, responsibility, and integrity. Reflecting on the journey, Daniel understood that the events of the past months had been a form of natural justice, karma in action, perhaps, but also a valuable teacher. The initial thrill, the public humiliation, the minor accident, and the ongoing reflection had all contributed to his growth. He realized that true freedom and confidence come not from reckless action, but from understanding boundaries, respecting others, and taking responsibility for one's choices. Daniel had learned that life has a way of teaching lessons when they are most needed. The viral videos, the public attention, and even the minor accident were all part of the process that led him to a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. He had transformed impulsive energy into thoughtful action, recklessness into responsibility, and fleeting thrill into lasting fulfillment. In quiet moments, he would sometimes visit the palace plaza, not for excitement, but for reflection. Watching the organized flow of people and guards, he felt a sense of respect for order, discipline, and the lessons life had given him. He remembered the royal guard, the viral video, and the minor accident, and he understood that each had played a role in shaping the person he had become. Ultimately, Daniel's story became one of growth, reflection, and redemption. It was not a tale of punishment or shame, but of learning, accountability, and transformation. He understood that everyone makes mistakes, but the choices that follow those mistakes define character, resilience, and maturity. Through his experiences, Daniel had discovered a simple truth. The consequences of actions are inevitable, but so is the opportunity to learn, grow, and change. By embracing accountability, showing humility, and seeking to make a positive difference, he had turned a reckless moment into a lifelong lesson, and in doing so had gained something far more valuable than temporary fame or thrill: wisdom, respect, and purpose.